Hi, I'm Jeff Zwart. This is Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
Well, Jeff, what a pleasure to be with you in such a special place. And we're in person in your Colorado garage, surrounded by some of your favorite friends here and your family members.
That's for sure.
And we're at 9,400 feet?
Yeah, almost. 9,300 feet is what we say. So quite altitude to be coming straight out of flat landing if you were coming from something more coastal. So it does make a difference. But we're at 9,300 feet, so we have our own weather up here.
So an award-winning photographer and cinematographer, director and driver lives 2 houses from the top of one of the highest points in Colorado. Why?
Oh, you know.
And how did you get all these cars up here?
No, it's, we've been in the valley here since the late 80s. And when you live in some place for a long time, you kind of always establish, well, if this area ever came up and we could live there, that would be a great possibility. And we'd always identified this particular spot because it's so quiet and into the road, and the altitude wasn't really the strong point in it, but that's part of it. And so when the chance came to live at the end of the road here, we took it, and it was a great space because for me, who travels all over the world doing my craft of film directing, to be able to come back to a space where everything's kind of in one place, and I can mountain bike out of the back door, I can canoe a few minutes from here, all that sort of thing. It's perfect for us.
It's a bit of a safe space for you, right? You're away from the lens, you're away from the action that you know so well. You're not in the mix of a race course or filming a commercial or thinking about any of that stuff. My sense is it just gives you the peace of mind to listen to the wind go through the trees and right?
Yeah, it's a special place, and like you say, it is completely separate from my work in a way, but funny enough, I like living in a place where everywhere you turn is a photo op, and we live in an Instagram era, and I'm so fortunate to live in a place like this. So it's nice to be able to roll out on a great road like you drove up today and see the things we get to see just to drive to town.
The optics also look good too from behind a lens when you put a beautiful car onto a road that has surrounded by pines and snow, even in late April or May, right?
Yeah, we can potentially get a little bit of snow almost any month of the year, but it was, the other thing that brought me here is that because of my category of kind of high action films and commercials, I ended up in Colorado a lot filming. And so we kind of circled around Telluride, Aspen, Steamboat, places like that, Crested Butte, to film commercials. And along the way, I just thought, if I could live in a place like this that we're filming, that would be pretty cool. So that's what drew us and got us here to begin with.
Yeah, it's been the focal point for so many car commercials because of the great scenery. And one car in particular that you did as a bit of a commercial was a bit of a high-powered one that was done near here, and it was just a Red Bull Formula One vehicle that was going over one of the main passes here, right?
Yeah. No, that was a pretty special project. Obviously, when you're specialized in a high performance area, you're always around racing, and certainly the pinnacle of racing is Formula One. And I'm one of the few Americans who've kind of had a reoccurring theme of Formula One in my work. And so when the project came along to kind of start promoting a new race here in the United States, with Red Bull kind of wanting to make that promotion and make people aware that there's a possibility of a new place, I kind of wrote and presented to Red Bull a project that would take us on a journey across the United States, doing pit stops literally from the Golden Gate Bridge all the way to the beach in Miami. And along the way, we stopped just a few miles from here and went over the top of Independence Pass. And let me tell you, to hear a Formula One car start down in the valley and you call them on the radio to send them up, and we've got everything in position to film it, and hear that howl of that motor as it came up the valley was pretty unforgettable.
Yeah, unforgettable for many of the animals who had never heard it either.
The
residents.
No wildlife around for a few days, I'm sure.
So that was just a couple of years ago, as a preparation for the Miami Grand Prix. what were some of the logistical challenges in doing it? Because what you really wanted to highlight in what you were filming there was a cross-country journey to go all the way from one part of the country to the other, and kind of hang a right at Colorado and now go southeast, as the commercial says.
Yeah.
But you took Max Verstappen's vehicle through sand.
Yeah.
You took him over the Bay Bridge. I mean, the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, every job has logistical challenges, and being that you're shooting with a Formula One car, which can't sit there idling, can't get caught up in traffic, can't drive over any big bumps or things like that. There was a lot of research and a lot of coordinating that went into it, and probably I've shot a little over 800 commercials in my career, and I would say that one of the more dramatic moments, and taking everything you kind of know from your career and putting it into one moment, that was on the Oakland Bay Bridge. And for us to close the bridge completely, the direction into the city, which is about 5 lanes wide, I think, and do a full pit stop with Daniel Ricciardo's car on that bridge, and to know that if something stalled or something broke down or whatever, there's literally thousands of cars being held from going into the city. There was a little bit of pressure on that.
Traffic and weather on the 8s, we have a holdup on the Bay Bridge.
Yeah, and it was a magical moment to be standing there. We shot it 3 times. We shot it once clean from the air, from the helicopter, once where I was on the ground actually filming it, and another time where it was all just kind of camera rigs on the cars, so that we really didn't see any of the crew or things that were actually filming it. But to stand there and call action and have that car come sweeping down onto the bridge and see it stop with Formula One precision with all the crew. And keep in mind that the crew's doing tire changes, but they don't have the gantries and all the things that they do in a Formula One pit stop. So they're actually carrying the air bottles on the backs and everything about it. So they're all self-contained, and they pour out of 2 minivans and change the tires on that. And when the car goes flying out of there and on down the bridge, it's a pretty satisfying moment. So it's definitely a high five moment between everybody.
In the 800, then, some commercials, that one has to stand.
Yeah, it was, like I said, it really was kind of a culmination of everything that I'd been doing through the years, too. So it put a lot of knowledge into one moment there. But as you said, we started in San Francisco. We closed down the Las Vegas Strip there. At night, we put little headlights on the Formula One cars to have it blast down the strip and cut through traffic. And then we came over Independence Pass here, and ultimately ended up on the beach in Miami. And doing the pit stop, a full pit stop on the beach in Miami, and just think about launching out of that pit, roosting all the sand and everything. It was a pretty cool moment there too.
Well, you've had many cool moments in your career, and I want to walk through several of those. But I want to start where it started.
Uh-huh.
So your father was a plastics engineer.
Yeah.
Mom was a school teacher.
That's right.
But they did instill in you this desire for this sort of wanderlust, this independence. And what struck me about your history is the fact that they let you go to Europe on your own when you were about 16 or 17.
Yeah, that's right.
And you were allowed to sort of go through the continent. It's 1972. Mm-hmm. And you rode bikes with a friend, through the continent, the old backpacking kind of imagery and dream, and you end up in Munich in 1972 when there's this little event going on called the Summer Olympics.
Yep, that's right.
Number one, how did your parents allow you to go to Europe on your own at that age? And number two, what was it like?
Well, having raised kids, I couldn't imagine sending my kids to Europe, especially in those times. It was so different because. And I laugh about it every time I'm there, but we landed in England, in London, and we got off a plane with 2 bags and basically assembled our bicycles and headed out. And we rode from England, Holland, Belgium, France, Italy, Switzerland, and ended up in Germany. And it was about 2,300 miles, 2,400 miles over 6 weeks on just bikes with everything that we had for the trip on those bikes. And the part that's so odd to me now is that we arrived on the edge of Paris at maybe 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We're staying in youth hostels. The youth hostel is on the other side of Paris. And to think of two kids riding their bicycles with AAA maps folded up, taped to your handlebars to ride through Paris and get to the youth hostel. No GPS, none of the things that we enjoy, or even the translations that we enjoy now, because, it's like, when you go to Germany, every street's like 27 syllables,
Right.
ending in Strasse. And to think that we rode all those distances just looking at paper maps. So that part was really challenging in it. And, for my parents, it was just, I guess trust in us. And we didn't really have any relatives or connections or anything in Europe to make it work. But it did, and it was an amazing trip. And I think that the thing that was, I guess, very, it kind of set the stage for the rest of my life is making things work. Going out and, it's even when I race at Baja or any of these long distance events, the single most important thing is you keep moving forward. And those kind of things that trip taught you, it was really cool. And I was racing bicycles at the time in the United States, and I was a junior, and two of my friends made the Olympic team. So that was the reason for really wanting to go to Munich in that year, to see my friends compete there. So that part was good. We were in plenty of fit. We were definitely fit to do the trip, and we rode over the Swiss Alps, and we did all sorts of things. But it was a very special, I think, like you say, for two kids at our age of 17 years old to make that journey. It was definitely defining for the rest of my life.
Yeah, a sense of adventure, a sense of curiosity, really, your parents instilled in you and cultivated and encouraged. Did you have an eye for the camera lens? Is that what you were thinking you were going to pursue in any way? I know you obviously went to Art Center College after that, after you got back from Europe, but
well, there's that in itself is a good story, because it just, I was an only child, and so I think that also helped to just know that, hey, I got to make it work for myself. My parents, as you said, my father was a plastics engineer, and in the 60s, the plastics was a big deal, and he was working night and day and long hours, and my mom, being a school teacher, was always working hard too. So I had a lot of time on my own, and I think that kind of instilled the creative spirit, and also you got to use what you have around you to make it work, and that was important. And I think that I was attracted to photography because my father went everywhere with a camera. My grandmother, surprisingly, was always with a camera. So I was exposed to that, but I never saw it as a career. And I was very interested, because I had spent so much time on my grandparents' farm in Iowa. I was very interested in becoming a veterinarian. So all of my education, high school and in college, was initially to become a veterinarian and to end up going to veterinary school. But which led me, after my trip to Europe, bicycling through Europe in high school, I just was so enamored with that place. And when I looked at the prospects of getting into veterinary school in the United States, it was going to be very difficult, and still is quite difficult. I decided, well, I'll try to go to veterinary school in Germany. So I went over to Germany again, this time not on a bicycle, and arrived in Munich with nobody to meet me. And I started looking around for veterinarians that needed my services, because I'd worked at that point 4 years as a small animal veterinary assistant, and ultimately ended up working for a large animal veterinarian. But while I had that job, as you can in Europe, on Friday evenings, I'd go down to the train station, get on the train, and wake up somewhere, and it was always to go to a race. So I'd go to the Dutch Grand Prix, or to Spa, or to Le Mans, or to Austria, to races. And when I was at the races, I just saw people taking pictures, and they were the closest people to the cars, and I wasn't mechanically inclined. I didn't know anything about becoming a race driver, but I just loved that scene. And I thought, well, maybe being a photographer could let me be around that scene. So that's where the life change took place. And it was funny because the camera was my enabler to be around what I was really passionate about. But I didn't discover that passion until I was in Europe working for a veterinarian.
But your dad did expose you to interesting vehicles, and,
Yes.
and the Porsche
Yeah.
901 was
Yeah.
the car that you learned to drive on.
That's for sure.
The
And-
precursor to the 911.
Yes, absolutely. My dad, my parents met on a blind date. He was driving an MGTC, a right-hand drive MG in the Navy. He showed up in his Navy uniform and picked up my mom on this blind date. So, that kind of all started around a car. And then my father just loved racing. And so we'd go to Riverside Raceway and we'd go to Laguna Seca. And then when we lived on the East Coast, they finally said, in 1964, they said, would you like to go to a big race for your birthday? Because my birthday is the end of May. And that was the Indy 500. And they took me to the Indy 500, and they had just got a new 356C, a slate gray and red interior, like your red interior, and had gotten that car, and we made the journey from Delaware to Indy, and I just fell in love with racing there for sure. But it was always special. My dad always had something cool. But as you said, in the 66, I think it was, he really wanted a 911, but he couldn't afford a new 911. And at that point, he just looked for the oldest possible 911 he could find, which nobody was really paying too much attention to, but it happened to be chassis number 35. So it was truly a 901. It was built in late 1964. And that was the car I learned to drive in. And it was such a special day. Sunday morning, my dad at the breakfast table said, so today I think you should learn how to drive. And I'm going to take you and show you how to drive. And I'm like, I'd messed around with it, of course, but I'd never really gone out and done it myself. And he told me, I think we'll take the 911 because it has more power and you won't stall as much. So that was my beginnings. And I started, I learned to drive in that 911. When you look at where my life has gone, that was a pretty cool way to start.
Well, in a way, you were kind of always surrounded by a car connection anyway, because do I have it right that your next door neighbor was Freeman Thomas,
Yes.
who is the awesome designer, awesome car designer?
Yeah, Freeman and I, we probably are our longest friendship too. When I look at just terms of years of knowing somebody, and it's an interesting story because, growing up, we've even kind of tried to recreate that in film at times of kids on their bicycles pedaling along to see the great cool cars or to ride to the Porsche dealership or do things like that. That was Freeman and I. And Freeman and I would chase the cars in the neighborhood back before the garage door would shut of all the cool cars. And so we were both so into it. And to think that Freeman, who was, I think, 2 years younger than me, we both ended up at Art Center, not really knowing that we were both going to end up at Art Center. He ended up in transportation design. I ended up in photography. And then my first jobs were at Road and Track magazine to do stories on Porsches. And his first job out at Art Center was to work at Porsche. And so I saw every apartment that Freeman and Renee lived in through the years, and in Weissach and different towns around there. And then Freeman went on to do the Volkswagen Beetle and the Audi TT and, things with Chrysler and things with Ford most recently. And now he's running Myers-Manx. So he's had an amazing career in the car world that I've been so fun to be attached as kids and then to see that all happen.
What was the first commercial shoot that you had? It was eventually related to Radical, didn't it?
Yeah. So it was because of my specialty in stills, which also was the high action area, that led to people always asking me, well, when are you going to start shooting film? And I said, I don't want to shoot film. I love the stills things. And then at that time, I was doing all of BMW's advertising, all of Porsche's advertising. I was doing Marlboro, IndyCar stuff with Penske. I was doing, every kind of high performance thing out there. And we were living a great life of just chasing high action things with a still camera. So finally, I got convinced I should join a film production company. And it happened to be Henry Sandbank. And Henry Sandbank evolved into a few different companies along the way that kind of separated things and became Radical Media. So I was kind of the first director at Radical Media, and that started my film career. And it was an interesting transition because it wasn't like I was shooting different things. I was just using different equipment to shoot it. And I went from a 3 to 5 man crew for stills, which we traveled the world as this little group and family shooting things all over the world. It came down to having a crew of 40 or 50 people and everybody specializing in different areas. So the infrastructure all came up around me. And surprisingly, literally, I shot my first commercial just a few miles from here over Independence Pass. So it was a place I was comfortable with. I spent so much time in Colorado that when it came down to let's go shoot my first commercial, I said I want to go to the place that I know the best, and that was here.
And you had a philosophy that you adopted early on that I think has stuck with you, which is you would always joke with the crew that if you're not uncomfortable on the shoot or taking an uncomfortable shot, it's not a good shot.
Well, you've
right?
done your research.
you love the challenge.
Yeah, I love
right,
the
Jeff?
challenge, and I think that's, we always say if it's not uncomfortable, it's not a great shot, and that's the way it is. But it is interesting too, now that you mentioned that, the business has changed a lot because of the equipment. When we used to film, we've shot with film, obviously. We shot with cameras that weighed 35 pounds with a head, they're 20 pounds, and tripod and all that stuff. I mean, this was just massive stuff. So when we wanted to give a driver's point of view, we had to run all this metal piping on the outside, mount a camera there. I would have to get in really awkward positions because I needed my eye on the eyepiece to see what I was shooting. And now our cameras keep getting smaller and smaller, so those awkward moments and painful moments don't happen as much anymore.
Well, that's good, because as you get older...
But I miss the pain sometimes. Yeah. I mean, I always liked, when there was a shot that I needed to do, because we didn't have drones in the beginning or anything, we'd climb up on the top of these mountains and get in high positions, and I've been roped off to the edge of cliffs in Venezuela and all this stuff just because you wanted that point of view, and now you kind of just send the camera on its way. So it's different.
Or how about back in the 80s when someone at Northrop saw your Formula One work and decided they're going to send you skyward in an F-18.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden you're in a co-pilot seat filming.
Yeah, that was, I don't think those moments happen very often anymore, but I was doing a lot of work, as I mentioned earlier, with Road and Track magazine, and one of the projects was to shoot the Formula One Spotter's Guide, and that led to me doing a lot of Formula One work. And that work, surprisingly enough, that was the nice thing about editorial photography, is there wasn't a lot of money in it, but your name was right there next to the photo. And the notoriety it gave you when you did a good job, and as much as we really focused on magazines in those days, it was a big deal. And so the head of marketing at Northrop came to me or reached out and said, "We love the work you're doing with Formula One. You seem to be able to capture these cars going really, really fast. So what would you think about shooting one of our fighter planes?" And so they brought me in first for the plane that they were privately funding, which was the F-20. Which was an evolution of the F-5, and it was if you can imagine, kind of a lower budget fighter plane for the rest of the world. And we shot that whole campaign for several years, and then that led to the merger of Northrop and McDonnell Douglas with the F-18. And so all of a sudden I was getting certified and to fly back seat, and I had a card that I carried with me that said I was Martin Baker ejection seat certified, and that allowed me to go on a base. I had a top secret security clearance, had everything I needed, and
Wow.
I was one of the few civilians that had that card and was certified. And so I shot all the F-18 advertising at the time, and it took me to carriers and to bases all over the West Coast, and just amazing flights in a fighter plane, which nobody ever gets to experience. And the interesting thing too is when I would arrive, they were never flying dedicated for you to do a photo mission. That was too expensive. You know, in those days, they'd quote me, it was $25,000 an hour per plane to put me up there. So
A little more than net jets, right?
Yeah. So I was always on a non-interfering basis. That meant I showed up, I would sit in the briefing in the morning, and all of a sudden I'd hear what we were doing. Oh, today we're doing high G dogfights, or we're doing a refueling mission, or we're doing low-level bombing missions. And I would fly on those missions and photograph during the mission if I could, but usually it was pretty serious and wild. But we would film going out and coming back from the mission. So it was a very special time. And, you know, I've got a certificate, I think, that I pulled 9.6 Gs and then F, what would that have been? That was an F-16, so pretty cool.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a couple of your other projects, massive projects. The Art of Racing in the Rain, Rush
Yeah.
with Ron Howard.
Yeah.
Tell me about those two experiences and maybe what they meant to you as a filmmaker, as a cinematographer.
They were just very special. And I mean, I hope I sense at least that I've been in very unique positions, and I really have felt very fortunate. And those were projects that being in the right place, the right time, and again, being able to use everything that I knew to that point. And it was an interesting thing that through Radical Media, I got word that Ron Howard was wanting to talk to me about this movie that he was going to do, and it was his first movie in racing. And really a first automotive movie. And he had kind of followed what I did, and he really liked the look of my action work. And he just didn't really quite understand how you capture that and what you needed to have. And that was what really a cool moment, because it was as simple as meet me at 8 o'clock at a restaurant, let's have breakfast together and talk about this. And I think we had 2 meetings, and the second one was much more focused on things. But what you realized is that Ron, as a director, was hungry to learn everything about what he was going to do, you know, and he wanted to know about the racing culture and about the cars and about the people and what's the motivation and dynamics and things like that. But then he also wanted to know, well, how do we capture that? Where do you put cameras? What's your philosophy in cameras and all that? So it was a few breakfasts, but it was, you know, his seed to what he went on to create with Rush. And I got to say too, is that Rush was a relatively small budget movie. And when I heard the budget, I was really concerned, like how do you do a period piece, let alone on racing? So I just was very happy with how it turned out, and I thought that the look and feel of the film was absolutely awesome. And then the dynamic of these 2 guys, you know, going after each other throughout the whole movie, he just captured so well. So.
Yeah, and the energy around those racing scenes.
Yeah.
I mean, you really, as a theater goer, as a viewer, you feel like you're in the cockpit, don't you? Yeah.
No, so that was fun to get started with him on that, but I didn't actually have any part of the filming of the movie. And then when the Art of Racing in the Rain came along, that kind of went way back for me, that literally I bought the book when it first came out. I read the book, and it was one of those books where every page I turned, my head was interpreting what I would have filmed to tell that page's story. And it just was so strong visually to me that Garth Stein wrote that book, and Garth Stein was doing a book signing, as they do in the beginning of these launches of books, and so I decided, I'm just going to go to book signing and talk to Garth. And so I hung around afterwards, and we sat around and talked about it, and it was just so cool, because his point of view, my point of view, the things that had captivated me in the book, he was really on board with. But I didn't have all the things I needed to make a film at that point. And so it stuck in my mind and went round and round. And, Patrick Dempsey comes along. He's got the rights to the movie. And I'm thinking, oh, this will be a cinch. And again, it took years to make it happen. And ultimately...
And you knew Patrick from the racing days.
Yeah, I knew Patrick from Porsche World and racing and everything else, and he's a true car enthusiast, so him having the rights to the book was a perfect combination. But it still was a struggle to get the movie done. And all of a sudden, it was like Christmas time, and I get a call, and it said that it looks like the movie is green lit, and we would like you to be involved in the second unit director, which directing all of the automotive scenes and racing scenes and everything about it, and then could you be an advisor for the whole film? So I kind of was multitasking in the film, but again, getting that moment of being able to kind of use everything I knew to that point, and having grown up in racing and raced myself, and the perspective of it. And you know, as I told you earlier, I was studying to be a veterinarian. So a book that's written through the eyes of a dog and a film that's being filmed through the eyes of a dog about racing and everything, I was in heaven. You know,
it's another Jeff Zwart moment.
it was just a perfect alignment of things. And I so enjoyed being on the movie, and I think that initially I was supposed to be on the movie for something like 12 or 14 weeks, and I think I was probably on it for over 20 weeks in the whole project, and I went to England during the edit, and just a lot of great moments in that movie, and it was just a nice movie in the end that anyone could enjoy, and you didn't have to be a racing fan, you didn't have to be any particular person other than somebody with a heart and a soul to fall in love with it. So it's very nice.
Jeff, you've done so many iconic car commercials. I think about the Porsche Panamera launch. I think you had 48 significant cars racing around a desert. The Cadillac ATS launch. You went from Morocco to China and everywhere in between. Jeep in the Super Bowl. Is there anything that really stands out among those that are your favorites?
You know, in my Porsche world, that was a fun one of the launch of the Panamera, because we really did have 48 historically significant cars in that film. And, you know, it's one of those funny things where, you know, I was so nervous not about the filming or anything. I was just worried that I would be remembered as the guy who ran a $10 million car into a $5 million car in the filming of it. Because there were a lot of moving and everything. We would do what looked like football plays of all the cars splitting off and when they split off and everything. So that was a very challenging film. And then you mentioned Cadillac, because Cadillac was an around the world project, and it was Cadillac versus the world basically with the launch of the ATS. So we started in Chile and went to Morocco and to Monaco and ended up in China. And to do that project, highlighting different features of the cars, but landing in completely different cultures with completely different crews, it was fun to just, you know, literally every 3 weeks I was in a new place, or 2 weeks in a new place, but trying to accomplish the same thing, but with an entirely different crew. We had our core crew, but you know, to go to China and get the same thing done that I'd just done in Morocco, there was a very interesting dynamic, and you learned a lot about managing crews and things, but that project was very, very special. So, but I've just been challenged and had an absolutely fantastic time shooting such varied commercials. And one that you didn't mention is the Forza commercial of the world's fastest Zoetrope, where we created these panels that we drove by that would sync with the camera and play and animate. And that was a project that was so fraught with just technicalities in it, but very satisfying when it was all over. But it has been something that's been so special to get to kind of share in a 30-second world of commercials.
And the precious Stuttgart medal danced and weaved, but did not run into each other, which was great.
That was a very, very, very stressful. So when you can turn in a 917, I think we had 2 917s on that project. So
undented.
Yeah, that was good. Very good.
What do you think of the world of Instagram now? Everybody's a photographer. I mean, back when you started, and you actually mentioned magazines earlier, and there was something to the fact that when Sports Illustrated would arrive on a Monday, or Road and Track would arrive in your mailbox on a Monday, and you had to look through the photos, and those were the only photos that were taken, and it was so difficult to see anything that was out there from a visual perspective. And now it's everywhere.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
You know, my philosophy has always been that the camera should be an extension of you. For me, in my world, the 2 most unintimidating things in my life is a car and a camera. A car can take me anywhere in the world, and I've done it. I've raced and driven cars all over the world, and it always keeps me moving forward. And the camera, to record it, is just an extension of me. And I think that, in a lot of ways, before Instagram happened, my friends could attest to, I would send them, email them, or text them a photo saying, right now. That was, it would always be the same caption, right now, this is what's going on there. And then Instagram came along, and it was my perfect platform to give the right now moments. And I think what's really nice is that people have that access to give windows, not just to their world they're living in, but to their perspective. And I like that perspective. And if anything, the amount of imagery that I'm exposed through a platform like Instagram is inspiring me and inspiring my own work and giving me windows into the way people look at things. And it's very trend dynamic. It's a trend dynamic of where things are constantly changing. And I think that the awareness of it, for me, within a business sense, is really something that I use a lot. But I love the spontaneity of it, and I love how people, now that we carry our phone and our camera as one unit, it's something very, very special. So I love it. But yes, that whole world of, like when I would go to the Brazilian Grand Prix with 25 rolls of film, which is, just over 700 pictures to take, and when you were out of film in Rio de Janeiro,
you better hope you got the shot.
Yeah, you had to be there. And all weekend at the Formula One race, you'd go, well, what if there's a great finish? I need to save some pictures. It was always that managing of it. And yet now it's, endless of what we can do. So the craft of it's gone away, but the people that are really good at it have still rise to the top.
What do you tell aspiring photographers who want to get into the automotive photography business?
To just shoot. And it's the things, when you look at what I had to work with and had to craft exposures and had to craft shutter speeds and had to control lighting because there was no latitude. It was what it was on that transparency. And now we have such infinite variability to what we can shoot with and filters on it and things like that. So the thing is, just start shooting and see what works and also just try things. And when we would try things, if it didn't go well, you'd run out of film. Now you never run out of film. So I think to just keep shooting and always have a point of view.
Photographer heroes?
Oh, Jesse Alexander. Jesse Alexander, the book At Speed, and we lost Jesse just a few months ago, it seems like. But the book At Speed, to open up a book that was this big, it was literally, I think, 3 feet across when it was open, and look at photographs that you could see the grain of it and the pupils of the driver's eyes through their visors and holding something in your hand that was dramatic, that was so dramatic in that way, and something I was so passionate about, that book single-handedly moved me to wanting to be what the craft was that I ended up with. So that was very special. And people like Elliot Erwood, who's just a street photographer, and there's just so many great photographers. And within just my contemporaries and people that are shooting now, I think that's one thing to have just personally, is the ability to be in awe of other people's, craft. And that, leaving room for that. And I think a lot of people don't. And I am truly in awe of so many photographers now, and I see photographers who are living the same life I lived, only 40 years later, and I love that, and I love to see their energy and their focus, and I'm in awe of what they do, and they continue to inspire me.
Favorite automotive event to shoot?
Oh, events. Luffa Cool.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
No, I love places that are highly photographic, but you can't beat the Goodwood Revival. Because you're living in this era of racing and cars going around you and everybody's dressed to it. But
what's your participation in Luffa Cool?
I am the creative director, I guess, of Luffa Cool. I'm kind of really in charge of the visuals and making sure that everything is, what I envision of being great photo ops within it. And for me, the greatest compliment is when somebody is attending our air-cooled event. We have curated the cars in there and where they sit and how they look in that environment, whatever the environment may be. And my greatest compliment is when somebody takes the photo that I set up, and then there's the people who don't take the photo I set up, but it's even better, so there's all that kind of handoff of things in there. But Luffa Cool is very special to me because it's based on the cars that I grew up with, and it's given me an ability to combine my photography side of life with my automotive, especially the air-cooled Porsche world.
And we're surrounded by many Porsches here in your garage. Let me ask you, the age-old air-cooled or water-cooled? What's your preference?
Air-cooled. Air-cooled. I mean, I've spent more time driving and racing and doing things in the water-cooled world, but the sound, the visceral nature of it, the lightweight nature of the early 911s, that's just an experience that can't be replicated today and is truly unique. And certainly Porsche has created a sound and an experience along the way that no other manufacturer has, so it makes it very special.
You're an accomplished rally driver. You've competed in the Pikes Peak hill climb with some real success. And this year will be the 100th running of the Pikes Peak hill climb. How did that happen? How did you get involved in that?
So many things in my life have been influenced by what you experienced as a kid. And when I saw people like Walter Roll and Michel Moulton and Ari Vatanen sliding up this big mountain somewhere in Colorado, I just thought that was the greatest. And I remember reading an early road and track story and hearing about Vic Elford with his air-cooled Porsche in rallies. So I was just attracted to rallying and hill climbs.
And what will it mean to you to go up the hill again this year?
This year is the 100th running of Pikes Peak. And 2 years ago, I got the chance to drive the new 935. And for me, again, and so much of what you and I have talked about today is bridging what I had in my youth or my early years to what I'm doing now. And when I came out of Art Center College of Design, it was in the turbocharged Porsche era. And the cars that were racing in IMSA and Camel GT were the 935s. I mean, these were monster 911s. So for me to drive the new 935 2 years ago, it was like a full circle moment of photographing those cars when I was out of school to actually racing one up Pikes Peak, a place that I just absolutely love and I look forward to every year to get to compete there. So then this year is the 100th running of Pikes Peak. And I just felt like I need to be there again. And I was offered again the real challenge, but yet truly special moment to drive the latest, greatest from Porsche, the 935, from the Ingram family. And so I'll be driving that again this year. And it will be a time where people are coming from the past and running cars that they ran in their days at racing there, and then all the modern drivers and a mix of it. And I love that aspect of it because Pikes Peak is truly a family of drivers, and I'm proud to be part of that family.
Excellent. We combine the world of racing and photography, for you, and then I think of something like Drive to Survive, which is really the nexus of both of those things. It is filmmaking at that high performance level that deals with the highest level of racing. What do you think of Drive to Survive? Because Mario Andretti came out recently and said he doesn't believe a Drive to Survive-like series would be very good for IndyCar.
The problem is they've done such a good job with Drive to Survive that everything from here on will be compared to that. And the challenges of the lower teams, of teams like Haas and teams like Williams, and getting into that and feeling the curtain get pulled back and really get to see the decision making and the heartbreaks and the highs and the lows and all those things. There was so much to attach yourself to beyond just the racing that's where it was such a special thing. And it engaged people that like us that are enthusiasts, but it engaged the people who purely like the human effort. And the human effort was displayed over and over again in that life and death situation, which opened a lot of people's eyes. And I think that was why it was so special. But like, it would be hard to just say, I'm going to do this moment in another racing series and expect it to be so successful.
And can you even believe it? I mean, from your time doing Formula One back years ago, that the curtain would be so far pulled back. I mean, you knew it when the curtain was, it wasn't a curtain, it was a door that was closed.
Yeah, no, I've really kind of seen all sides of it because, like I said, I used to shoot the Road and Track Spotters Guide, which meant I went to Rio de Janeiro, I shot every car, every engine, and every driver, and it appeared in the magazine of those 3 shots together. You don't even get access to taking a picture of an engine these days,
Right.
or even the underside of the car or anything about it. So it's so tight. And then to see this series where it suddenly really did open up everything for people to see. And I think that was the moments after it would air early on, it would be at times where like Danny Sullivan and I would talk to each other, can you believe they showed that? Can you believe this? We just can't believe that they pulled back the curtain that far.
Jeff, let's end on this. You once said, if I were to make a list of my 3 favorite things to do in life, they'd be hanging out with my family and my dog in the mountains, right where we are here today, going to the Nürburgring and hammering around in a rental car all day long. We'll give Hertz a call after this one.
Yeah, I found out later that wasn't actually in your contract.
Yeah. And the third one would be directing a television commercial, which I really view as recreation and therapy. And if I could do anything I wanted to do tomorrow, I'd hit the road and shoot a commercial.
Yeah.
Still the same?
That's still the same. Because I've traveled the world with a group of people that are specialists in what they do, and they're friends, and we go through so many things together and so many challenges, and we're all we've got. And this little crew puts out a great thing every time. So wonderful. I love it, and they're family, and it's a great thing, and I've been able to include my family in it, and it ticks all my boxes still to today.
Well, thank you for inviting me to your mountain home, and we should go shoot a commercial.
Okay, I'm glad you could be here.
Let's take one of your vehicles here and go and shoot a commercial.
Okay, we can
Thanks
do that.
for being on Cars and Culture.
Thank you so much.
The automobile is one of the most important inventions that revolutionized the modern world. In America, the rich history of car culture runs deep as technology continues to shape the future of the industry. Jason Stein, former publisher of Automotive News, is here to share the stories of people passionate about cars, from industry leaders and innovators to car-obsessed celebrities. Buckle up as Jason takes you inside the boardroom, onto the track, and around the bend on Cars and Culture on Sirius XM Business Radio.